walked out of that banquet hall with my hands in my pockets and didn't look back once. Not because I was angry. I was past angry. I'd been past angry for a long time. My son-in-law's father, a man named Hector I'd only met twice, was standing outside near the ballet stand, smoking a cigarette and watching the fountain in the center of the circular drive. He looked at me when I came through the doors. I must have had something in my face because he didn't say a word. He just nodded, the kind of nod one old man gives another when there's nothing useful to say. I nodded back. Then I walked to my car, sat down in the driver's seat, and stayed there for about 20 minutes before I started the engine. Let me back up. My daughter's name is Iris. She's 31 years old, and she has her mother's eyes, brown, steady, patient in a way that mine have never been. She married a good man named Everett last October, in a vineyard about 40 miles outside of Charlottesville, Virginia, the kind of place where string lights hang between old oak trees and the tables have small mason jars of wildflowers on them. I helped pay for about a third of it. I didn't say anything about that at the time, and I'm not saying it now to complain. I wanted to do it. Iris is my child. There isn't much I wouldn't do for her. Her mother and I divorced when Iris was 9. It was not a clean divorce. There were lawyers. There were arguments about the house, about the truck, about a savings account I'd built up over 7 years working double shifts at a plastics manufacturing plant outside of Richmond. I didn't fight hard enough for any of it. I was tired. I wanted it to be over. I told myself the money didn't matter, that what mattered was Iris, that I would rebuild. I did rebuild. It took a long time, but I did it. Her mother, I'll just call her my ex-wife, because that's what she is, remarried within 2 years. A man named Douglas who works in commercial real estate. He is not a bad person, I don't think, but he is the kind of person who believes that money is a form of communication, and that the more of it you spend on something, the more clearly you've expressed how much it matters to you. That's a worldview I don't share, but I understand it exists. After the remarriage, my relationship with Iris stayed close. I picked her up every other weekend for 11 years. I went to her school plays and her track meets and her high school graduation. I drove 6 hours to help her move into her college dorm and 6 hours back the same day because I had to be at work Monday morning. She called me on my birthday every single year without fail. Even the years things were strained between us, she called. When she told me she was engaged to Everett, she called me first, before her mother. She told me that herself. So I wasn't operating under any illusions about where I stood with my daughter. I knew we were good. What I didn't fully understand, until that wedding, was how her mother had been talking about me when I wasn't in the room. The gift I brought was an envelope. Inside the envelope was a letter I had written to Iris by hand, which took me 4 drafts and most of a Sunday afternoon to get right. I am not a natural writer. I'm a man who spent 32 years on manufacturing floors and the last 8 doing quality inspection for a medical supply company. I don't express things easily in words, but I tried, and I meant every sentence. Along with the letter was a slip of paper. The slip of paper had an account number on it and a routing number and a note explaining that I had opened a joint savings account in Iris's name, just hers, not Everett's, because I didn't know Everett well enough yet to feel comfortable with that. And I thought Iris would understand, and that I had deposited $22,000 into it. That was not a small amount for me. I'm 63 years old. I work. I don't have a pension. I have a 401k I'd been contributing to for 20 years and a house I own outright because I paid off the mortgage 4 years ago and didn't celebrate because there was nobody there to celebrate with. The $22,000 came from a combination of savings I'd set aside specifically for this occasion and the money I received when I sold my father's truck after he passed 2 years ago. My father drove that truck for 19 years. I held on to it for 3. Selling it felt like the right thing to do when the reason finally came. I wanted to give Iris something real, something quiet, something that didn't make noise at a party but would matter later when they were trying to put a down payment together, or when something went wrong the way things always eventually go wrong. I didn't tell anyone else what was in the envelope. I just put it in with the other gifts on the table they had set up near the entrance, in a white envelope with Iris and Everett's names written on the front in my handwriting. The reception had been going for about 2 hours when it happened. I was sitting at a table near the back with Hector and his wife Celia, and a couple of Everett's cousins whose names I couldn't remember. I didn't mind. I was watching Iris dance, which was all I needed to be doing. She looked happy. That was the whole point. My ex-wife was at the head table with Douglas and both sets of parents, which I understand was a logistical decision made by Iris and Everett, and I had told Iris explicitly that I did not mind. I did not mind. I did not mind. I had made my peace with that particular seating arrangement a long time ago. What I had not made my peace with, what I didn't even know needed making peace with, was what happened when they started opening the gift envelopes. I don't know exactly how the tradition started or whose idea it was. I've been to weddings where gifts are opened later, privately, and I'd been to receptions where the couple goes through cards at the table and people make a bit of a show out of it. This reception was the second kind. Someone, I think it was one of Douglas's sisters, suggested it, and Iris and Everett laughed and said, "Sure." And then there were a few people crowded around the gift table, making announcements into a microphone they'd borrowed from the DJ. I wasn't paying close attention at first. I was talking to Hector about a fishing trip he'd taken up in Montana. But then I heard my daughter's voice say something near the microphone, and I looked up. She was holding a white envelope. My envelope. She opened it, and I watched her read the letter. She got quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that happens when something reaches you before you've had a chance to prepare yourself for it. Then she looked up, and she was smiling, and she started to say something into the microphone about how her dad had written her a letter. That was when my ex-wife leaned in. I couldn't hear what she said from where I was sitting. I saw it. I saw her lean toward Douglas and say something, and then she reached out and took the slip of paper from Iris's hand, and she looked at it, and something in her face changed. And then she said, loud enough that the table nearest her could hear, "I know because I saw their faces." She said, 22,000? That's it? After everything, that's what he sent. She said it like it was a number to be embarrassed by. Iris didn't respond right away. She stood there holding the letter, and I saw her face do something complicated that I recognized because I had seen that same expression on her face when she was 9 years old and her mother and I were standing in our kitchen arguing about the electricity bill. That expression meant, I am trying to decide which parent to protect right now. I didn't want her to have to make that decision. I stood up from my chair, and I walked over to the gift table, and I picked up the slip of paper that my ex-wife had set down, and I put it back in the envelope, and I put the envelope in my jacket pocket. Nobody said anything. I kissed Iris on the top of her head. I shook Everett's hand. I told them both they looked beautiful and that I loved them. Then I walked out. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, as I said. I want to be honest about what I was feeling, because I think people sometimes tell these stories and smooth over the parts that are unflattering. The truth is that the first thing I felt was not dignity. The first thing I felt was something closer to shame. That particular flavor of shame that men of a certain age and a certain economic bracket know well, the shame of being made to feel like you came up short, like the number you saved and sacrificed for and were proud of was actually just evidence of your own inadequacy. I felt that. And then I felt something else. I thought about my father's truck. I thought about the morning I signed the paperwork to sell it. A 1997 Ford F-150 with 214,000 miles on it, and a crack in the dashboard that my father had covered with a strip of electrical tape sometime around 2003 and never replaced. I thought about handing over the keys to a man I'd never met before, and watching him drive away, and sitting in my own car afterward without turning the key for a long time. I thought about what I had been trying to say with that envelope. And the shame started to recede. Slowly, but it did. I drove to a diner about 6 miles from the venue. One of those old roadside places that's been there since before the highway was built. With a neon sign out front, and vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like it's been on the burner since Tuesday. I ordered coffee and a piece of apple pie and sat by the window. I had been there for maybe 30 minutes when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Local area code, but not a contact in my phone. I almost didn't answer. I'm the kind of person who doesn't answer unknown numbers. But something made me pick up. The man on the other end introduced himself as Gordon. He said he was a friend of Everett's family, that he'd been at the reception, that he'd seen what happened, and that he wanted to talk to me. I told him I was at a diner and gave him the name of it. He showed up about 15 minutes later. He was somewhere around 70, I guess. Gray hair, work-worn hands, a wedding ring he'd been wearing so long it had left a permanent groove in his finger. He slid into the booth across from me without ceremony and ordered a coffee from the waitress before she'd even finished asking. He told me he'd served with Everett's grandfather in the army, that he'd known the family for 50 years, that he watched what happened at the reception and recognized it in the way that people who've lived a certain amount of life recognize certain things. Then he slid a piece of paper across the table toward me. I looked at it. It was the account slip from my envelope, my routing number, my account number, Iris's name. I looked up at him. He said, "Your ex-wife set it down on the table when she walked away." I picked it up before anyone else could get to it. Figured it ought to go back to the person it belonged to. I didn't say anything for a moment. He said, "She's going to need that. Young people starting out, they always need that. Don't let one ugly moment take it from her." I folded the paper and put it in my shirt pocket. We sat there and drank coffee for about an hour. He told me about the fishing in Montana. I told him about my father's truck. Neither of us mentioned the reception again. The next morning, I called my bank before I called anyone else. I had set up that savings account 3 weeks before the wedding, specifically so I'd have time to make sure everything was in order. Iris's name was on it. The money was there. The account was intact. I called Iris after that. She answered on the second ring, and her voice sounded like someone who had been awake for a while. She said she'd been trying to figure out what to say to me all night. I told her she didn't need to say anything. She said she was sorry. I told her she didn't have anything to be sorry about. She said she didn't know her mother was going to do that. I believed her. I told her I believed her. There was a pause, and then she said, "Dad, what was in the envelope?" I didn't get to finish reading it, so I read her the letter. Over the phone, the morning after her wedding, sitting at my kitchen table with my second cup of coffee and the morning light coming in through the window over the sink. I read her the whole thing, all 4 pages, and my voice only broke once, near the end, which I think is a reasonable outcome for a 63-year-old man reading a letter to his daughter about what he hoped her life would look like. When I was done, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I want you to come over for dinner this week. Just you. Is Tuesday okay?" It was okay. I haven't spoken to my ex-wife since the wedding. I don't intend to. We don't have anything left to say to each other, and we haven't for a long time. I think she knows that whatever standing she had with me, whatever thin thread of civility we'd maintained for Iris's sake, she cut it herself that afternoon, and she knows it. Douglas sent me an email about 2 weeks later. It was brief, measured, the kind of email someone writes when they've been coached or when they've had time to think about liability. He said he hoped there were no hard feelings and that he regretted how things had unfolded. I read it twice, and then I moved it to a folder and didn't respond. I'm not interested in Douglas's hard feelings or in his management of them. That is not my responsibility. The account is still there. The $22,000 is still in it. I transferred the account to Iris entirely, took my own name off it, about 2 weeks after the wedding. She called me when she noticed. She asked me why. I told her it was hers. It had always been for her. She got quiet again, the way she had when she was standing at the microphone. Then she asked me if I was doing okay. I told her the truth. I said I was getting there. I think about Gordon sometimes. I think about the fact that he didn't have to do what he did. He could have left that piece of paper on the table. He could have minded his own business the way most people do. He didn't. He picked it up, kept it safe, found a way to get it back to where it belonged. That's a small thing in the accounting of the world. But I've found that it's the small things that settle in you. I'm 63 years old. I don't have a lot of illusions left about how people treat each other, or about how marriages end, or about money, or about the particular cruelty that comes from people who feel entitled to measure you and find you insufficient. I've been measured that way before. I expect I will be again. But I also know that Iris called me first when she got engaged. I know she read my letter on the morning after her wedding and asked me to come to dinner. I know that when she thinks about who showed up, every track meet, every move, every phone call, and every birthday, she knows who that was. Some things don't need defending. They just need time and patience and the willingness to let the record speak. The record speaks. I've had a lot of time to sit with what happened that afternoon, and the thing I keep coming back to isn't the humiliation. It's the silence that followed it. Not my silence, though I did go quiet. I mean the silence that falls over a situation after the worst thing in it has already been said. That particular stillness. I've noticed it has a way of revealing exactly who people are once the noise has stopped. My ex-wife said what she said because she had been saying versions of it for 30 years, not always out loud, not always in public. But the belief underneath those words, that my efforts were insufficient, that what I could offer didn't measure up, that wasn't new. I think I knew it was there. I just didn't expect her to say it at our daughter's wedding, into a microphone, in front of people I'd never met. What I've come to understand is that actions like hers don't come from nowhere. They come from a long habit of measuring people by the wrong scale. She looked at a number and decided it told her everything. It told her nothing. The $22,000 in that envelope came from 32 years of double shifts and a truck I loved and let go because the moment finally called for it. You can't read that in a routing number. You'd have to have been paying attention, and she stopped paying attention a long time ago. That's a choice with consequences. Not punishment, just consequences. The natural kind. When you spend years reducing someone to what they're worth on paper, you eventually lose the ability to see what they're actually worth. And then one morning you're standing in the wreckage of a moment you created. And the person you diminished is sitting in a diner eating pie and feeling, against all expectation, okay. I'm not a philosopher. I'm a 63-year-old man who works in quality inspection and makes his own coffee every morning and talks to his daughter on the phone more than he probably has any right to expect. But I've noticed that the people who come through hard things with their heads still on straight tend to share a few qualities. They know right from wrong, and they act on it even when nobody's watching. Gordon picked up that slip of paper because it was the right thing to do, not because anyone would have noticed if he hadn't. They think clearly under pressure, instead of reacting. I walked out of that reception hall, not because I was defeated, but because I understood in that moment that staying would not serve anyone I loved. And they keep going. They don't stop at the hard part. They sell the truck. They write the letter. They read it out loud over the phone the next morning when their voice wants to break. Iris asked me if I was doing okay. I told her I was getting there. That was the truest thing I said all weekend. Getting there isn't a defeat. Getting there isn't a whole work. It's the only honest answer any of us has, if we're willing to give it. The record keeps. That's what I've learned. Not everything gets witnessed. Not everything gets acknowledged in the moment. But the record keeps, and the people who matter to you, the ones paying attention, they know. Iris knew. She knew who showed up. She knew who showed up. She knew whose name she called first. That's the account that matters, and nobody can take that one from you.